In this video, I want to talk about 10 subtle marriage habits that are actually undiagnosed autistic coping mechanism. So, if you, as the NT spouse, have ever thought, why does my suspected ASD spouse get so upset when the evening routine changes? Or, why do they seem emotionally disconnected after work? Or, why does everything in the house have to happen the exact same way? If you had those thoughts, you may not be looking at stubbornness. You may be looking at undiagnosed autistic coping mechanisms. And that changes everything, because what often appears to be emotional indifference, rigidity, avoidance, control issues, or selfishness may actually be a nervous system trying to stay regulated enough to function. So today, we're talking about the 10 subtle marriage habits that are commonly misunderstood in neurodiverse marriages, especially when autism has never been identified. And by the end of this video, I want you to begin seeing friction differently. Not as proof that your spouse doesn't care, but as evidence that their brain may be trying to survive. So welcome back. I'm Mark Hutten, and on this channel we talk about autism, relationships, emotional connection, and the hidden dynamics that quietly shape neurodiverse marriages. Now, one of the biggest mistakes couples make is assuming every behavior is intentional. Most of the time it's neurological. And when you reinterpret behaviors through that lens, resentment often begins turning into understanding, not excuse making, understanding. Because once you understand the function of a behavior, you can finally build systems that work for both people. So let's get into it. Habit number 1, the exact same evening routine every night. Maybe your suspected ASD spouse eats dinner at the same time every night, sits in the same chair, watches the same shows, needs the same sequence of events before bed, and when something interrupts the routine, they become irritable, withdrawn, anxious, and even disproportionately angry. Now, to the neurotypical spouse, this can feel controlling, rigid, emotionally inflexible. But for many autistic adults, repetitive evening rituals are not preferences. They're nervous system regulation tools. The autistic brain often spends the entire day overstimulated, masking, interpreting social information, managing sensory input, suppressing anxiety. The evening routine becomes the brain's decompression chamber. Predictability lowers cognitive load. Sameness lowers stress hormones. Repetition creates safety. So when you, as the NT spouse, suddenly say, hey, let's go out tonight, or my sister's stopping by, the autistic nervous system may experience that not as spontaneity, but as neurological disruption. That doesn't mean the routine should dominate the marriage, but it does mean the couple needs systems instead of shame. For example, advanced notice, transition time, predictable scheduling, shared planning. These reduce nervous system threat without turning one spouse into the emotional villain. Habit number 2, needing excessive alone time after work. A neurotypical spouse may interpret this as, you don't want to be with me, or you're emotionally unavailable, or you care more about your hobbies than our relationship, or work is more important to you than me. But many autistic adults experience social interaction as neurologically expensive, even if they enjoy people, even if they are successful professionally, even if they appear highly functional. Conversation, noise, lighting, decision-making, reading facial expressions, office politics, all of that drains cognitive and sensory bandwidth. So when they come home and immediately disappear into the garage, gaming room, workshop, basement, or office, or wherever they go, that's not rejection. It's recovery. And this is where alexithymia complicates everything. Alexithymia is difficulty identifying and describing emotions. And most autistic adults genuinely do not recognize that they are overwhelmed emotionally or sensory-wise. They simply know, I need to shut down for a while. So the neurotypical spouse sees emotional avoidance, but internally, the autistic spouse may be fighting neurological overload they can't even verbalize. The solution here is not forcing emotional intensity at the doorway. It's creating intentional reconnection rituals. Maybe the agreement becomes 30 minutes of decompression first, then we reconnect. That tiny system can completely change the emotional tone of the marriage. Habit number 3, becoming irritated when household systems change. The dishwasher gets loaded differently. Furniture gets rearranged. A new cleaning process appears. The grocery store changes brands. And suddenly, your suspected ASD spouse seems disproportionately upset. Again, this often gets interpreted as control. But autistic brains frequently rely on procedural predictability to reduce executive function strain. When systems become automatic, the brain conserves energy. Unexpected changes force cognitive recalculation, and that recalculation may feel neurologically exhausting. This is why many autistic adults become deeply attached to routines that seem irrational to you as the NT spouse. The system itself reduces overwhelm. The goal is not to make one spouse win. The goal is collaborative predictability rather than emotional chaos. Couples who thrive in neurodiverse marriages stop arguing about whether routines are reasonable. Instead, they ask, how do we build systems that protect both nervous systems? That question changes marriages. Habit number 4, sounding emotionally flat during serious conversations. And this one hurts couples deeply. The neurotypical spouse says, I'm hurting. And the autistic spouse responds with logic, solutions, facts, or emotionally flat statements. No visible empathy, no matching emotional energy. And the neurotypical spouse thinks, he just doesn't care. But many autistic adults experience empathy differently than they express it. Internally, they may care very intensely, but their nervous system prioritizes problem solving over emotional mirroring, especially under stress. Now you add alexithymia to the mix, and they may not even recognize the emotional cues that the spouse is sending. So the conversation collapses. One spouse feels emotionally abandoned, the other feels chronically accused of intentions they don't have. Now, this is why neurodiverse marriages often need explicit emotional transition systems. For example, as the NT spouse, you can say, when I share pain, I first need validation before solutions. Or you can say, can you repeat back what you think I'm feeling? These systems sound mechanical at first, I understand that. But ironically, systems often create more intimacy in neurodiverse marriages, not less. That's going to benefit you as the NT wife, because predictability reduces misunderstanding. Habit number 5, avoiding social gatherings. Family events, neighborhood parties, church functions, dinner invitations. The autistic spouse frequently avoids them, leaves early, or appears disengaged. And then the neurotypical spouse feels embarrassed, alone, and unsupported. But most autistic adults experience social environments as massively overstimulating, especially environments requiring constant unstructured interaction, noise layering, multiple conversations, social performance, eye contact, unclear expectations. The brain can go into threat mode long before the autistic person consciously realizes it. And after years of masking, many autistic adults develop avoidance patterns simply to protect themselves from exhaustion. The solution here isn't forcing constant participation, nor is it total withdrawal. Healthy neurodiverse couples often negotiate realistic social agreements. For example, time limits, recovery days, exit plans, small gatherings instead of massive events. Again, systems over resentment. Habit number 6, hyper-focusing on hobbies while neglecting emotional connection. Now, this one creates enormous pain in marriages. The autistic spouse may spend hours researching, fixing, building, gaming, collecting, organizing, or diving into special interests. Meanwhile, the neurotypical spouse feels emotionally starved, invisible, unchosen. But special interests often regulate the autistic nervous system. They create predictability, mastery, dopamine stability, and recovery from social stress. In many cases, the hobby is functioning almost like emotional oxygen. The problem is not the hobby itself. The problem is when the marriage has no intentional connection systems competing against it. Neurotypical spouses often wait for spontaneous emotional attunement, but many autistic spouses operate better with structured connection. That would be scheduled date nights, daily check-ins, weekly relationship meetings, predictable affection rituals. Ironically, structure often creates the consistency the neurotypical spouse has been begging for years. Habit number 7, taking things extremely literally. The neurotypical spouse says, it'd be nice if someone helped me around here. The autistic spouse hears a vague observation, not a request. Then the neurotypical spouse becomes furious because the hint was missed. This dynamic happens constantly. Many autistic adults process language more literally than inferentially. Indirect communication creates confusion, not because he doesn't care, but because his brain prioritizes explicit information over implied meaning. So couples often dramatically improve communication by becoming radically clear, not harsher, clearer. That would be specific requests, specific expectations, specific timelines. Clarity reduces conflict. Habit number 8, shutting down during conflict. Many neurotypical spouses interpret shutdown as stonewalling, but autistic shutdowns are often nervous system overload events. Too much emotion, too much unpredictability, too much sensory input, too much cognitive demand simultaneously. The brain essentially begins conserving resources. Speech becomes difficult, processing slows down, eye contact drops. The person may appear cold or detached when internally they're overwhelmed beyond capacity. And this is why intense, emotionally escalating conflict often fails terribly in neurodiverse marriages. The ASD nervous system can't process it efficiently. Healthy couples learn regulation first conflict systems. That would be pause agreements, written communication, lower sensory intensity, timed breaks, repair conversations later, not because avoidance is healthy, but because regulation is necessary before productive communication can happen. Habit number 9, over-explaining or defending small mistakes. The autistic spouse misses something minor and suddenly launches into a 10-minute explanation. Then the neurotypical spouse thinks, why can't you just apologize? But many autistic adults carry years, sometimes decades, of feeling misunderstood, criticized, or chronically wrong. So explanations become protective mechanisms. It's an attempt to restore accuracy. It's an attempt to prevent future misinterpretation. Unfortunately, and understandably, the neurotypical spouse often experiences this as defensiveness instead of anxiety management. Again, reframing changes everything. When couples understand the fear underneath the behavior, they stop fighting surface-level symptoms. Habit number 10, appearing emotionally indifferent during times of stress. This is one of the most painful misunderstandings in neurodiverse marriages. The neurotypical spouse experiences grief, overwhelm, loneliness, or emotional crisis. And the autistic spouse becomes quieter, more withdrawn, more task-focused, more emotionally flat. And then the neurotypical spouse concludes, he just doesn't care. But under high stress, most autistic adults become more cognitively task-oriented because emotional processing becomes harder. Not easier, harder. Alexithymia can intensify this dramatically. So they may genuinely struggle identifying what they feel, expressing what they feel, and recognizing what their neurotypical partner needs emotionally, all at the exact moment the marriage needs it the most. Now, this does not erase the pain of the neurotypical spouse, but it changes the interpretation. And interpretation matters, because when couples stop viewing neurological coping mechanisms as moral failures, they can finally begin building bridges instead of battlefields. Now, if you recognize your marriage in this video, I want you to hear something very clearly. Understanding autism does not magically fix the relationship, but misunderstanding it quietly destroys the relationship. Many neurodiverse couples spend years fighting the wrong enemy. They fight intentions instead of neurological realities. They make character judgments instead of looking for nervous system patterns. But when couples begin reframing friction as function, everything starts changing. The goal here is not perfection. The goal is translation, understanding, predictability, repair, and building a marriage where both nervous systems matter. Now, if this video resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, because we talk deeply about autism, alexithymia, neurodiverse marriage dynamics, Cassandra syndrome, emotional connection, and practical systems that actually work in real relationships. And if you're looking for deeper support, coaching, or structured tools for your neurodiverse marriage, check out the links in the description, and they're also pinned in the comments section. The two of you are not incompatible. Nobody's doing anything wrong. Your ASD spouse is wired that way, you're wired that way. And there's far more underneath these patterns than either of you realized. See you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, It'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.